What's up guys? Today we're going to talk about everyone's favorite Hermetic book, the Kybalion. Just like the Emerald Tablets, I originally stumbled upon this in 2015 in audiobook form on a back alley website. So I actually didn't realize anyone else knew this book existed until just the last year or two. So you can imagine my surprise when I picked up this new copy in October from Barnes & Noble, and the silver-haired clerk guy, who could easily be your dad, was like, "Wow, that's one of my favorite books. I've read it like 4 times. I was extremely excited to hear that, so cheers to you, mate, if you ever end up watching this. Since this book is clearly on people's radar now and appears to be well loved, I'm going to give you an overview of its Hermetic philosophy, starting with what is Hermeticism and the book's premise. Then we'll hit mental transmutation, the all, and last, the 7 Hermetic principles. Let's do it. The Kybalion is a spiritual book of medium-level difficulty that you definitely want to read and add to your toolbox. Surprisingly, it was published a long time ago in 1908 by the cryptic author 3 Initiates, which, as you may know, is the term for spiritual seekers who have attained a very high degree within a mystical order, as opposed to neophytes, beginners. The type of wisdom contained within it is defined as Hermeticism, a logical, down-to-earth philosophy and spiritual path said to be laid down in ancient times by a personage known as Hermes Trismegistus, specifically in the land of Egypt. And I'm inclined to believe the Egyptian origin, not only because some of the Hermetic writings explicitly denote Egypt as the location, such as the Corpus Hermeticum and the Perfect Discourse, Logos Teleos, but also because the ancient Gnostic writings, found in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, share certain terminologies. What you'll immediately find appealing is first that they say the philosophies will be like a master key, reconciling all the various esoteric knowledge you've gathered so far, showing that there's a common influence throughout them all, while also giving you the basic tools to competently forge your own path ahead. They claim the reason for this is that these were in fact the oldest teachings within this world cycle, that then permeated all the other lands via accomplished initiates. And this goes well with the hypothesis that Egypt immediately superseded the sunken Atlantis as an advanced society. We can't say for sure, but you'll soon find it at least seems plausible, because the teachings in this book are what I call natural or baseline wisdom. It's mostly logic and observation based with a minimum of mysticism involved. In short, very appealing to Westerners. But what actually is the Kybalion? Besides being the odd title of this book, it's the name of the oral tradition Hermetic teachings that were never written down, but only transmitted to worthy seekers throughout the ages, meaning ones that were ready to comprehend, see the value, and put them to productive spiritual use. They use this approach not only to preserve the quality of the teachings and prevent the establishment of a blind theology,
"Hey, don't throw shade, homie,"
but also so they don't attract the attention of persecuting authorities and masses that might get triggered and try to cancel them, through a host of all the pleasant medieval methodologies we've heard of. So the Kybalion is basically a collection of Hermetic axioms and precepts, a lot of the terminology of which is purposely veiled in obscurity and designed to be expanded upon by a teacher. And the initiates quote from this verbal work throughout the book as launching pads for their discussion. Last, their overall purpose is to give the reader a solid overview of the teachings, so you'll have the tools to go deeper through your own practice if you choose. After this cogent introduction, the initiates briefly debrief us on what are called the 7 Hermetic principles as the launching point for this book. The principles of truth are 7. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. We have the principle of mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. These are touted as 7 natural principles of reality you can conceivably derive yourself through observation and contemplation, a function which the initiates supplement for the reader throughout the book via many relatable, mundane, and scientific analogies. Keep in mind, from the time period of 1908. The Hermetic philosophy is based on these 7 principles, and apparently they'll be complementary or harmonious with whatever spiritual tradition you study. And getting back to whether or not these are truly authentic Hermetic teachings, I find it interesting that you can in fact detect these themes when reading the Hermetic literature. And we're going to define those 7 principles shortly in part 4. But first, the point of them, and the point of learning and studying this philosophy, is to become skilled at what's called mental transmutation or alchemy. which isn't something magical. It really just means the ability to change your mental states from unpreferable, oppressive, disempowered, negative ones to positive, productive, enjoyable, peaceful ones. When most think of the Kybalion, they probably think of the 7 Hermetic principles exclusively, because they're cool, they stand out. But gaining the skill and tools for mental transmutation is actually the core focus of this book to keep in mind. And the initiates instruct how to leverage the principles for that purpose. So this is the nature of the mysterious alchemy we've all heard of. Not necessarily turning lead into gold like a magic man or Edward Elric, but mastery of your mental state through perspective and will, much like Stoicism. You develop this skill over time through intelligent observation, sustained effort, and learning the right mental tools, such as can be found in this book, a process I would sum up as right mindfulness, to borrow a technical term from Buddhism. The practical value of this, other than having more control over your mental state, is that it can be applied outward to your external life, getting more of the results you want in your worldly life by how you handle your inner state, keeping in mind that we still only have a certain amount of control over the ultimate outcomes, and prioritizing an empowered reaction no matter the results. In short, by learning about the 7 Hermetic principles, we can begin to consciously use these natural laws instead of being used by them. Because if you're not wielding your mind consciously throughout your life, then in your default autopilot state, you're being moved unconsciously by all the mental and external forces of which you're not aware. This is a great place to add on the initiate's definition of spiritual development, because we can all train our intellectual minds to whatever degree we want. But if we want to move towards our inner spirit, we need to add a new dimension to our practice. And in the degree that man realizes the existence of the indwelling spirit immanent within his being, so will he rise in the spiritual scale of life. This is what spiritual development means: the recognition, realization, and manifestation of the spirit within us. Try to remember this last definition. It contains the truth of true religion. Part 3, the All. This section will help clarify what is really meant by the spirit immanent within us. The first Hermetic principle of mentalism states that the All is mind, the universe is mental. And I'll decode what that means shortly in Part 4, but first we have to understand this important term, the All. The inevitable ultimate goal that we're working towards, since this is not just a worldly path of development, but a spiritual path, is the principle Hermeticism calls the All. Under and back of the universe of time, space, and change is ever to be found the substantial reality, the fundamental truth. It is beyond true naming, but the wise men call it the All. You know this is important not only because it's in the first principle and in all capital letters, but the initiates spend several chapters elaborating on this concept before they even get to each of the other 6 principles. Though at first it just sounds like it means everything, it really includes everything plus the infinite unmanifested potential. In other words, this is what we call the Source, Father God, the Infinite, the Unconditioned, the Tao, the First Cause, and so on. But here's how they define it. The All is the substantial reality underlying, constituting, and imbued within all the outward manifestations and appearances we experience in this universe. All phenomena are composed of this unchanging base, and it is in itself unknowable and undefinable, because by definition there can be no duality or concepts within it, such as perceiver and perceived. Some of the other synonyms they use for it are spirit and infinite living mind. Since words like spirit have different connotations, in order to avoid misunderstandings about this concept, they make sure that we know the only reason we're giving it a name at all is so that we can talk about it and work with it for our path of development, like a guiding North Star. We could just as easily call it Supreme Unknown Variable X, but that would kind of sound like a dystopian communist dictator named by Elon Musk. Right, no jokes ever, sorry. However, there are 3 main worldly attributes we can apply to understand it better. It must be all that is. Nothing can exist outside of the All, otherwise it wouldn't be the All. The All must be infinite, for there is nothing else to define, confine, bound, limit, or restrict the All. As you can see, they love their capital letters. But anyway, it's therefore infinite in the dimension of time, eternal, infinite in space, everywhere, infinite in power, absolute. And third, it must be immutable, or not subject to change in its real nature, for there is nothing to work changes upon it. You'll notice in these explanations there's two frames or perspectives we need to take into account. A concept called the law of paradox, or the divine paradox. And this isn't one of the 7 principles, it's actually a mode of the 4th principle of polarity. When discussing the all in the truest sense, non-duality is involved. Meaning from the ultimate point of view, everything we assume is real or substantial is actually just an appearance upon closer investigation. It's all just a transformation of one substance. Our human minds apply concepts and memories on top of these appearances and assume them as independently existing. So the only actual real thing, in the sense of substantial and permanent, is what we call the absolute, spirit, or the all. Adyashanti's phrase, emptiness dancing, is perhaps the best phrase that captures this idea. But as for the second frame, which the initiates explain in Chapter 6, the divine paradox, we can't become infatuated with this philosophy and start to become ungrounded and delusional, as if in a dream. We still have to act intelligent and discerning, and can't ignore the relativistic perspective of things that allows us to operate in this world. Keep your mind ever on the star, but let your eyes watch over your footsteps, lest you fall into the mire by reason of your upward gaze. Remember the divine paradox, that while the universe is not, still it is. Remember ever the 2 poles of truth, the absolute and the relative. Beware of half-truths. For example, if you start to cling, keyword cling, to the idea that nothing is actually real and is therefore like a dream, in the logical extreme you could think, I'd like to jump off this cliff and try to fly like a pterodactyl. Unless you're an enlightened master, you're still going to fall 1,000 meters, no matter what thought you had in mind about life. And the point of saying this is that even if we know that ultimately everything is an appearance or mental creation, the created world is still governed by the natural laws, and there's still consequences to everything we do. So we want to be as skillful as possible with how we operate. More like a video game than a total dream. That's why the Hermetic art, even for masters, is about using the laws to raise yourself higher, rather than pretending the laws don't really affect you just because you know the higher nature of things. But don't worry, if you happen to lose sight of this, the laws will inevitably wake you up in unpleasant ways as you trip over them. Something we've all experienced. Now, in case you're like, come on, let's get to those 7 principles already I've heard so much about, the reason I'm leading with this concept instead of the 7 principles is because it's important to understand the nature of the ultimate goal we're heading towards, even if you're not someone who's actively seeking that. But the reason we even want to reach such a height of mind, the experience of self-realization, satori, or gnosis, is because it permanently establishes the highest joy and peace within you. It's freedom from mental suffering that doesn't depend on what external or internal conditions are doing. Hence, Gnosticism calls it attaining rest. You might also be thinking, well, the initiates say that all is unknowable, so how can we realize it or see it? You'll notice a lot of the time when they bring this up, they carefully say the all in itself is unknowable. And to me, this is emphasizing the fact that when we look at it as a thing objectively, it is unknowable because there's no duality within it. However, as conscious beings, as extensions of the all within a body-mind vehicle, it is possible for us to achieve a glimpse of it through dedicated spiritual training, the practice of realigning with it, turning our focus away from the conditioned personality self and back towards the all self, that which doesn't land on identities. Like I said, this is the awakening nirvana, stream entry and satori of Buddhism, self-realization and mukti of Hinduism, and becoming one with the Father in Christianity, transforming from a son of man into a son of God. This is important to realize because it opens up the way to see that we're not just subservient underlings on this earth, but that it's actually possible for us to raise our minds to the level of the universal source. So now that you know the objective, mental transmutation, and the nature of the ultimate goal, the all, here's a brief overview of the wisdom teachings, the 7 Hermetic principles. For the sake of time, I'll go in depth on them in the next video, including their implications and how we make use of them for alchemy. Number 1, the principle of mentalism is that the all is mind, the universe is mental. And this means that the ultimate source of the universe, or God, is akin to a supreme mind, or infinite living mind. And therefore, universes, together with everything they contain, are a mental creation of the all. They dwell within the mind of the all. Just like how we as humans form dream worlds or images in our minds. Though everything is technically just the all, we can choose to perceive a multiplicity of so-called separate things, the 10,000 things as they say in Taoism. Number 2, the principle of correspondence is summed up with the classic phrase, as above, so below. As below, so above. This captures the fact that the laws and phenomena of one plane of existence will share similar principles and characteristics to the other planes, since everything comes from the same source blueprint. The 3 main planes are classified as physical, mental, and spiritual, with many subdivisions, and you can apply the observations from one plane to speculate about the nature of the others. Number 3, the principle of vibration is that nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Everything, matter, energy, and mental activity, is really just a mode of vibration. From the ultimate spirit, which vibrates so quickly it appears at rest, all the way down to matter, which vibrates much slower and also appears to be at rest as a result. Again, this concept carries through all planes of existence, including mind. Number 4, the principle of polarity. Everything is dual, has poles, and has its opposites. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. This is a great one because it's fundamental to the structure of our reality. Nothing can exist without an inherent duality. The nuance is that not only does everything manifest with poles of extremes, like hot and cold, but these extremes are really just different names for the same property. So they're identical in nature but different in degree, literally in the case of temperature. Number 5, the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. Rhythm is yet another self-evident facet of reality. Within the activities of all phenomena, there's a measured back and forth cyclical principle that manifests in different ways depending on what area of life we're looking at. Most notably, we see this in nature with the tides of the oceans, the changing seasons, movements of the planets, and we also see it in worldly life, like the fluctuation of economies. Number 6, the principle of cause and effect, or simply causation. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. Matthew McConaughey puts it well in Magic Mike when he says, "The law says every cause has its effect. But I think I see a lot of sixth principle breakers up in this ass." This point emphasizes the fact that law pervades and governs the universe, as implied in Principle 2. And they demonstrate this by pointing out the fact that the things we call chance are really just the precise result of innumerable known and unknown causes coming together at the right time. Number 7, the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This one, in my mind, is a specific aspect of polarity. However, it has a focus on the property of generation, creating and producing. So it's not just that there are these 2 charged poles within everything, manifesting in blatant ways like physically male and female bodies, but also that they have a definitive purpose and interplay. We see this very clearly when you consider positive and negative charged particles interacting and coming together to create new entities called atoms. This concludes my first lecture on the Kybalion. If you want to see the next video, including all the other great esoteric content I have planned, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification button. Also, make sure you leave me a big thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Also, I just dropped some new t-shirt merch I designed, so check that out if you want to support the channel. Also consider my Patreon if you want to have your name on the Wall of Fame in the end credits next time. Also, you get to see the new videos I put out a full day ahead of time before I put them on YouTube. So, with that, peace out.
Palo Santo. This is one of my favorite incenses.
No.